Hello, my name is Alec Breslow from Mask Audio Electronics, and today I'm going to show you how to put together the Gorva Design LARAN. First, we're going to go through what's included in the kit. Keep in mind I'm working with a pre-release version of the kit, and everything I show might look slightly different to what's included in the final version. So first, let's go through what's included with the kit. First of all, we have the main circuit board plus the Footswitch daughter board, a 6-conductor ribbon cable to connect the two, all Gorva high tolerance resistors, 3 100 ohm, 2 1 kilo ohm, 2 100 kilo ohm, 6 10 kilo ohm, and 5 1 mega ohm. We have 5 100 nanofarad capacitors, 1 microfarad capacitor, 2.2 nanofarad capacitor, and a 10 nanofarad capacitor. We have a premium soft click Gorva Footswitch, along with my signature obelisk knobs, 2 A100K potentiometers, 2 mono jacks, a 100 microfarad polarized capacitor, a single diode for polarity protection, 3 2N7000 MOSFETs, 2 2N5089 bipolar transistors, and 1 flat top LED, several feet of wire, and the Gorva S90 enclosure. Now please note, I am working with a pre-production version of the kit, and several things that you see here may look different in the final version. Next, we'll go over what is not included in the kit. First of all, a soldering iron. Some sort of solder. Suggestion, I like Kester solder. It works a whole lot better than just going to your average big box hardware store. Solder's a whole lot better. Will make your life a lot easier. Some sort of wire cutters that can cut 24 gauge wire. Component clippers. A Phillips head screwdriver. Needle nose isn't quite necessary, but comes in handy. And some sort of socket set. I like using Pepper's Petals rocket sockets because they're a lot easier. They have these little handholds that are a lot easier to use. So general rule of thumb for populating a circuit board is you start from the lowest profile components to the highest profile components. So we're going to start with the resistors. No specific order you have to populate them, nor do you have to worry about what orientation they are going to be. So you just want to fold resistor legs as such. Pop it through the board, and then I like just folding the legs over on the other side. So once all your resistors are populated in the board, take it over, and we will begin soldering. So, clean our iron tip, and hold it for a few seconds, and we're good. And just kind of repeat that for every joint. And last one. And we're done. And we can just kind of start trimming off all of our leads. And there we go. So when you're done, your board should look somewhat like this. Next, we are going to populate the transistors. Normally in the pedal population process, this would be one of the last steps, but because all the other components are much taller than them, we will be doing them next. First, we are going to populate the MOSFET transistors in Q1, Q3, and Q4. These are polarized components. Please put them in the same orientation as they look on the board. So you just pop them in. Again, just pull down the leads. Straighten you out a little. There we go. Q3 and Q4 are actually acting as diodes instead of transistors, meaning they're affecting how the circuit is clipping. Next, we will populate Q2 and Q5, which are our bipolar junction transistors 2N5089. These are relatively high gain transistors. If you wanted something lower gain, you could replace it with a 2N3904. Those down. These are heat-sensitive components, so you will want to limit how fast you are soldering each leg. I like to do one leg on each component and do them in a fast rotation. Next, we will populate the 1N5817 Schottky diode, which is used for polarity protection, and it just goes in D1. You want to populate it with the stripe facing the same way as it is on the board. This is another heat-sensitive component, so again, be mindful how long you're holding the iron to it. Next, we will start populating the capacitors. Put your 2.2 nanofarad in capacitor 2. This is acting as somewhat of a tone control, lopping off a fair bit of high end early on in the circuit. Next, we populate our 10 nanofarad in capacitor 4. This is acting as a bright cap, like it would on an amplifier. As you turn down the more control, it is taking off low end. If you want more low end to be taken off, you can increase the value. If you want less, you could lower the value or take it out altogether. Next, we'll populate our 1 microfarad capacitor right at the end in capacitor 8. This is a very large value capacitor to let the full frequency spectrum through. And then we will populate our 100 nanofarad capacitors in the rest of the slots. If you want less space to run through the circuit, decrease them. If you want more, increase them. Just be mindful of the spacing. So now we have all of our capacitors in place. so we'll flip it over. I'm just gonna put it on top of this empty enclosure, that way it doesn't rock around on me while soldering. And now we have all of our capacitors populated. Now we'll populate C9, which is our power filter capacitor, to take out all the noise from your power supply. It is a polarized component. It'll only work if it goes in one way. You have the long lead, which is your anode, and the negative lead, which is your cathode. So the long lead, anode, goes in our square hole oriented on the board. Just populate it in. Make sure it's flat to the board. Get it on there good and tight, and solder it in place. So now with our components all attached to the board, we are going to switch our focus here for a moment to our Footswitch. We're going to attach our Footswitch PCB. Make sure the letterings are on top, or else you've installed it backwards and it won't work properly. Now, foot switches are somewhat sensitive to heat, so I suggest only doing a couple lugs at a time and then letting it sit for a bit and doing something else to make sure you don't destroy your foot switch. While we wait for our foot switch to cool down, let's put on the potentiometers. So both potentiometers included with the kit are the same value, so we'll just kind of gently put them in there, hold them down, and I like doing a gentle tacking in just the middle lug and straightening them out. Next, we are going to cut and strip our wire. To make sure things don't get messy, a good strip gauge for LARAN is to just make sure it's about the width of the enclosure. So we'll need 6 pieces of wire. Take your wire, clamp down, strip a little bit off each end. We're gonna solder 2 more foot switch legs. Next, we're gonna prepare our mono jacks. So we have our tip, which is gonna be our live signal, which is slightly longer than the sleeve, which is going to be our ground. So I just kind of like filling them with solder for actually adding wire. Do like foot switch thing. So next, I like to just use a pair of needle nose to hold down the jack. And turn your iron a little. Just insert the wire through your tinned hole. For both sides. That doesn't have enough solder in it.
feel free to add a little bit of extra solder if you feel it needs it. Repeat the same thing for your other jack.
And then you trim off any extra that's popping through the other side. I have to do this weird grip thing because the room we're shooting in has carpet, and we will never find it if it goes flying off. Alright, and now we will solder our last two legs. So now we're going to attach all the wires that are going to attach to the top of the pedal. All of our square pads are ground, while all of our octagon pads are either signal or in the middle 9 volts. So we take our tip and put them in the octagon pad, our sleeve, the square pad, just kind of fold them down a little. Opposite for other side. Then populate our jacks for power. And then populate our wires for the power jack. And just add a little bit of solder. I like doing this from the top. Makes life a little easier. And then flip it over and cut off the excess on the other side. So that way our little wire scraps don't poke through and ground anything to where it's not supposed to be. So hopefully you've procrastinated long enough and soldered all the legs of your Footswitch to the daughter board. So now we are going to populate the 6-conductor ribbon cable to both. So just rip off one edge. I like sticking it underneath the board because it's a little bit of a cleaner look. Some people like doing it on top because it's easier. I like soldering the outside legs first. That way I can make sure, go back through while pressing down, reflow them so the bottom of the ribbon cable is flush with the board. Finish soldering the rest of the connections. We'll flip the board over, take out the other side. Do the same thing for our Footswitch. Do the outside legs. Make sure we are on there straight. And flow. Rest of your connections. Be careful with how close these connections are, that you don't flow too much solder and accidentally connect 2 pads together. And we'll chop off all of our excess wire. And there we go. Our board is ready for boxing. A tip for the Footswitch, make sure the bottom nut for the Footswitch is a couple threads off the bottom. If you have it all the way to the bottom, sometimes you can crush in the Footswitch. Keeping it off the bottom will make sure it makes a good tight connection to just the enclosure, not to the Footswitch itself. So before we start putting everything in our box, we're going to put in our power jack. So just insert it through our center hole here. And thread our internal nuts. Get in there and tight. Grab our 14mm socket. Get it good and tight. I like to use the needle nose just to get it straight. And now we are ready to put in the PCB. So between steps, I also remembered you need to put on the lock washer on the Footswitch. It helps a lot. So gently hold PCB together and just kind of work everything into their holes. Get everything hand tight for a moment. Now we will tighten everything down. Alright. Just gonna strain our Footswitch out. Gotta be careful, it could damage the PCB. That looks straight. So, before we put in the jacks, I'm actually gonna chop these down a little smaller. That way, you don't have too much excess wire going on. Alright, so our ground pad will go to the one joint that is 90 degrees. Because we, as an industry, have decided center negative is the way to go. Solder that in place. Excess. And then 9 volts will go on this topmost run on the power jack. The other will remain unused. Chop off excess wire. Be careful not to chop the wire you already soldered. There it is.
And we'll take our wire out of the way. Next, we'll finish soldering in the lugs on the potentiometers. I like doing them one leg at a time on each one, just to distribute the heat a little better. Then one last step, just to take the strain off the ones we originally soldered, just reflow them. Real quick, it doesn't take a lot, just a little bit of new solder, and you'll see them shift back just a little. Alright, next we'll take our jacks and fit them to their corresponding holes. Just get them in hand tight. Oh, there it is. Then we'll take our 1/2-inch socket, finish cranking them down. Step is very important not to have either tab on your jacks touching the pots. If they are, I just like taking my needle nose, giving them some rough adjustment so nothing is touching. As you can see, I've cut a little bit too much wire for the jacks. That's fine. Just make sure they're out of the paths of the cables as they are inserted. Last step of the process, we are going to attach our LED to the Footswitch PCB. Similar to the polarized capacitor, the LED is also polarized, but same as the capacitor, long leg, square hole. I just kind of insert it here on the top, gently through the hole on the enclosure, keeping my finger to keep it steady so it's flush. Then fold down our legs. LEDs are very sensitive to heat, so be very quick about soldering them. Cut off our excess. And there you go. You've now completed your LARAN. Normally at this point, I would take it over to the amp and test it, but because we are shooting today, we're going to skip to one of the last steps, putting on the knobs. There are no pro tips for this. I just kind of put them on. And give them the good old eyeball treatment. Alright. Last, but certainly not least, take your back plate, put it on, and use our 4 screws. You don't need anything more than hand tight. And congratulations, you've completed your Gorva Design LARAN. Let's take it over to the amps and listen to how it sounds.